Joining us, the proprietor of the Uber blog Hullabaloo, and the columnist over at Salon.com, Heather Digby Parton. Heather, welcome back. We've got you in some noir lighting so that we capture your mood today. What has you so noir these days?
Well, I shouldn't be, what with all the Epstein hoopla, which is sort of strangely enough, a bright spot. But, there's just so much. I mean, it's overwhelming. Every day I wake up and I grab my phone like everybody else does who does what I do. And I'm just, so what fresh hell awaits today? And it's always something with these people. And it's so gross, the stuff that ICE is doing, the lack of empathy toward people on SNAP benefits. Now Trump is talking about, you know, getting rid of that as well, and all the stuff we went through on the shutdown, the cruelty, the meanness of it all. It gets to me. So I end up feeling a bit, just a bit a bit dark, I guess, in my mood because of all that. Having said that, though, there are some good things over the past couple of weeks that, are worth lightening my mood just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to get too navel gazy about this, so we'll move on from this quickly. But you and I have been doing this. I mean, I think I've been interviewing you for 20 years. I certainly been reading you for I don't know, since the day you started the blog, probably, I don't know, 22, 23,
Mhm.
24 years
Me too.
ago.
Yeah, me too.
And the amount of political news that is um, that is relevant, right? I
Mhm.
mean, on any given day, we have, we're at the break. Usually, we just sort of confer briefly about what we're going to talk about, and we could be on the verge of a war, I guess, with Venezuela, which has been largely under the radar. We've killed over 80 people now unilaterally by blowing them up in boats. That barely makes a headline now. It's just sort of like, page 7, a little brief. Hegseth announced we killed 6 more people today
Mhm.
for both dubious reasons and completely illegal ones. Like, even if their excuse about it, that they're narco drug, terror, monsters, even if that were true, there's no authority to just unilaterally bomb these guys, and it doesn't make a peep because there's a half a dozen other stories that are. I mean, nobody even covers the fact that, like, the Trump family has made billions of dollars
Just gonna
in
say,
10 months and have every aspect of our government is now leveraged to make him money. And it's completely like a mob project. And then, with the people cracking heads on the street with and it's, today at the beginning of the show, it's like, okay, how do we even go forward in covering all of this stuff? Because it all is pretty relevant, both in terms of like the destruction of our government, the immiseration of our people, and what might get us out of it.
yeah, exactly. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is overwhelming. And I mean, I just wrote a piece yesterday that'll go up on Salon over the weekend about the pardons and commutations as well as the punishment of enemies. That alone, that level of abuse of the Department of Justice and the pardon power is, I mean, nothing. I mean, as Trump likes to say, we've never seen anything like it, and we never have. I mean, there's been abusive pardons before, and there have been, so Richard Nixon tried to leverage the Department of Justice against his enemies. But this is just, it's a full system that they've developed for doing this now. And you have these crazy people throughout the administration, and God knows how many people we don't know about that they've just stuck in that are going to be there for God knows how long before they're discovered, that are just devoted to this project of rooting out Trump's enemies and rewarding his friends. And it's a full blown autocracy, kleptocracy, oligarchy. I mean, the whole thing is happening right there. And it's so big that it's hard to wrap your mind around. We just sit here and try, like you say, just trying to cover it, much less trying to analyze what the whole thing means or how to deal with it or what the prospects are for it collapsing or the Democrats, somehow rising from the ashes. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I hear, there are a lot of people that I know in my real life who are just saying, I can't keep up, I can't
Yep.
do it. And that scares me because, you kind of have to. I mean, if everybody doesn't do it, that's one reason why the No Kings protest kind of made me feel a little bit better because it was huge. And it just showed me just being among people, they're just ordinary people. They're not like political, anything. They were just ordinary people, at least in the groups that I was with. And I realized that, okay, people may not be paying super close attention like I do because it's my job. Um, but they know they're getting it. They're getting what's happening. So, and then of course the election results kind of validated that as well.
Yeah, those, I mean, the election results, I don't remember a time where Democrats won so many seats that, or I should say, lost seats that they weren't like, meant to lose by 10 or 15 points. There are some places where a Republican is going to win regardless of what the situation is. But there was, I've never seen the board sort of run like that. And then days later, like there was enough time for the smoke to clear. We see 8 Democrats in the Senate vote with Republicans to end the government shutdown by passing a continuing resolution that both got rid of like a lot of hemp production that was snuck in there by Mitch McConnell and his $800,000 worth of liquor lobbying money, and a provision to basically pay half a dozen senators $500,000 because they were investigated about January 6th. Um, and give me your sense of like what that's about. I mean, it's, look, it's not just those 8. It's quite clear that Chuck Schumer sort of was like nurturing this, although he didn't vote for it because he didn't have to.
Mm.
Um, and it does feel like it was manipulated in such a way that some people who were resigning were going to vote, like they were protecting some of their other senators. What's your take on why they did this?
Well, there's no doubt about that. And it's not the first time. I mean, we've observed this over the years that when there's something sort of unpopular with the Democratic base that needs to be done, they find a way for the people who are safest in that situation to, they'll take the bullet and they'll do it in order to spare their brethren the pain of having to face their constituents with a vote that they, wanted to take but would be unpopular. So that's exactly what happened. I mean, it's obvious, right? I mean, you don't have only the resigning people and people who aren't up for reelection until 2030, all being the ones to take a vote, and everybody else going, "Oh no, I'm really upset and I'm not going to do that." Clearly, that was just they were taking the fall for it, and of course Schumer was doing that. I mean, they wanted to end the shutdown, as everybody did, but they were the ones who set this up as the battle of all battles on the Affordable Care Act. And so when they didn't get it, it felt like a serious defeat. I mean, I was never sure, to be honest, how exactly they were going to get out of this. It was always very risky. It was a risky gambit in that way because they just don't have a lot of power. But the way that they lost it was just ridiculous. I mean, it was just pathetic. Doing it right after we had this big win, where the wind was at the Democrats' back, where the base was feeling incredibly excited and motivated. And the whole country was kind of looking at this going, wow, these Democrats are getting their act together. They're doing this. Okay, maybe they've got a point here. And instead of just, okay, so let's assume that maybe they couldn't get the ACA credits extended because for whatever reason, the Republicans were digging in their heels. Trump was about to get them to nuke the filibuster, which would have been fine. Go ahead, do it. I mean, what the hell? At this point, I was saying, okay, if that's what's going to happen, it's going to happen. But in any case, what ended up happening was that they ended up they had Angus King going on TV saying, oh well, we fought Trump and he won, or whatever it was he said
We
along
can't
those
stand
lines.
up to him.
We can't stand up to him. I mean, my God. And instead of doing something like, I remember Brian Beutler wrote a piece the other day where he was saying, look, there are ways to lose well. One of them would have been to say, okay, all right, we got to get people fed and we're going to have to get the airplanes moving, which was one of the big reasons why they
Yep.
felt they had to get it, because the airline thing was happening. But we got to do that. There's just, we're behind in a rock and a hard place. But guess what? You get 1 month. That's all you get. And we'll give you 1 month of a continuing resolution. And, we're going to keep talking about this. And then we might give you another month. And then we'll give you another month. And that's how it's going to go, because we can't trust you people. This rescission thing, we make a deal with you, you come back and stab us in the back and just say, no, we're not going to do it. So we can't trust you. So this is how we're going to do it. And, obviously the Republicans needed to end the thing too. They were taking heat. They were getting blamed for it. And that might have worked, but it would have shown some strength in the situation at least. So I don't know if that would have worked, but there were other ways to do it that would have been better than just having a bunch of old, retired people and some sort of no-name moderates. I mean, well, he won and we just have to go along with it. And all the other ones kind of raising their fists and going, oh, we didn't want this at all. This isn't what we were looking for. So it was lame. And the only thing that's saving them is Epstein.
Yes.
Because, that came along at the right moment to just completely change the story. And they may get lucky here. And the base may be, excited enough about that particular development that some of the sourness goes out of that.
I want to turn to the Epstein thing in a second, but I want to just dig in a little bit more on that dynamic of why they did it. Because like you say, I think the real key was what you said about the filibuster, because Donald Trump was beginning to really, really aggressively pressure them to get rid of the filibuster. And they were being blamed for the shutdown, the Republicans. The Democrats had just come off of an incredibly strong showing. The filibuster, I think that this was the institutionalist, the establishment of the Democratic Party within the Senate establishment. Chuck Schumer and the Mark Warners, who didn't vote for that, oddly, and some of the others. They, I think, are very, very afraid of a situation without a filibuster. And, they look down on the horizon and they're looking at the Senate races. If the Democrats pick up any seats, all of the people who have said this, I think, have already committed. Well, we'll see who wins in Maine, but in Nebraska, he would caucus with the Democrats. There's a lot of candidates out there who are saying, let's get rid of the filibuster. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a real fear amongst these Democrats that the filibuster goes away, because that is going to empower the more progressive side of the Democratic Party. And, I think from my perspective, I think yours, yours too, let's get rid of the filibuster and make people own their votes. Like, make them own. There's no more pretending what they stand for. Make them own it and stop having this sort of like deus ex machina to step in and stop progressive change from happening. Or for that matter, really horrific conservative change, because people, we just got to bet. Exactly. And we just got to bet that people are going to, want to live in a country where there is a snap, where there is, a USDA or an FDA, or, let the American public see what the parties actually stand for.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And of course, we've been talking about this for a long time, because as everyone knows who studied the issue, the filibuster works against progressive progress. Progressives are the ones who want to do things. They want to make the government, work for the people. They want to make it do things, create programs. And, that includes, sometimes raising taxes on rich people and things that, a lot of these people who are beholden to special interests don't want to do. But it works for the conservatives. I mean, look, all you have to do is look at it this way. Look at what happened during Biden's term. He managed to, pass quite a bit of pretty good legislation. Much of it's being rolled back now by Trump, but it was pretty good. We were, but it was so hard fought and was so pared down and whittled away because of two senators, both of whom were conservative divas, people who were, right there on the cusp of being Republicans. And this goes all the way back as long as I can remember.
Yep.
It's always a few right there in the middle who are basically saying no. And the filibuster was what worked to make that happen. They couldn't get past the filibuster. Now, Biden and the Democrats managed to get some stuff through anyway. They persuaded those two to vote for some stuff, but it wasn't what could have been. It wasn't the kind of big legislation that should have been possible under those circumstances, especially coming out of a crisis like we were in coming out of the pandemic. But that just proves what it is. It's always a couple of conservatives. Remember, I don't know if you remember back in the 90s, maybe this is before your time, there was a guy named David Boren who was from Oklahoma. And there he was every single time, just standing in the way of doing anything that was decent in the U.S. Senate. You had, Ben Nelson of Nebraska. Now, remember the Cornhusker kick during the Obamacare, Sturm und Drang that we went through. So it's always been that way, and we know that. So, this is what the people in the Democratic Party who are beholden to, the kind that we don't want to tax rich people too much, and we don't want to have to do anything too dramatic or anything too extreme to help people, because that might upset the golden goose here that we've got going. So they want to keep that filibuster in, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I was watching that so closely because I'm sitting there thinking, go ahead, nuke the filibuster. And there's a reason why the Republicans didn't want to do it, because they didn't want to attach their name to all the garbage that Trump was going to make them do. And they didn't want to have to own that stuff. And, I'm going, yeah, let them own it. Trump wants their names on all of this. And we've got an election coming up here next November. I'd like to see them do it. Go ahead, pass it. I mean, can things really be that much worse if they pass it, or if Trump just does one of his executive orders? I don't think so, except it'd be worse for them. That's
because
all.
they'd own it. And I will say, when Trump would talk about getting rid of the filibuster, it was only in the context of changing voting laws in some way to help him empower. Because your point about what legislation Democrats would pursue versus Republicans, the bottom line is that once Republicans get their tax cut, their legislative agenda is over. They have nothing else. They don't want to create a healthcare system. They don't want to create anything. And Trump would have had them going in there and saying like a national voter ID law and all these type of things that I think they all know sort of like unleash the worst elements in their party. And they know that is untenable for them to win elections if the worst, if they have to own the worst impulses. That's why in the House, they get rid of their tariff authority so that Trump can go do these tariffs. And they're just like, we don't have the ability to do anything about it anymore. And so I think people should understand that, because we are fighting a massive war on one front, but people should be aware that there's another front that maybe we cannot dedicate resources to as much as we would want in this very moment, but that front exists. And that is because, look, Chuck Schumer's fighting a two-front war, and one front is ostensibly the Republicans, and the other is essentially the progressives in the Democratic Party. And this is one of the ways that he does it. And so I think people need to be aware of that going forward. But let's talk about the thing that may end up at least limiting the conversation of that, and that is the Epstein release that we saw. There's two things happening. One is that when the shutdown ended, Mike Johnson was forced to sign in Adelita Gravala, and she was the 218th signature on the discharge petition, which is pushing legislation into the House to release the Epstein files. Now, of course, it has to go to the Senate after that, but this is putting, shifting around who gets the pressure. The other is the House Oversight, the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee had subpoenaed Jeffrey Epstein's estate and got hold of 20,000 emails that they released in a massive dump. And wow, what of these emails stuck? We could probably talk about this for an hour and a half, but what struck you in the most poignantly in this?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of things, just setting Trump aside, just, the groveling obsequiousness of these people toward Jeffrey Epstein, all these important people like Larry Summers and this woman who I can't remember her last name, who was in the White House counsel's office under Obama, just groveling toward Jeffrey Epstein just made me sick. It just tells you. I mean, we don't even know how Epstein was really making his money. I mean, we don't really know where his wealth came from or how he got all this influence, but he clearly did. And it's sick. Um, Besides that, of course, there's the Trump stuff. And the Trump stuff is very important because it validates something which I wish people would just acknowledge this more, that we already knew. They're acting like, oh, we just found out that Trump really was, good friends with Jeffrey Epstein and that he really was part of his. Look at what Epstein said about him, that he said he's dirty and I know all about him and all that stuff. I mean, the fact is, you know, Donald Trump said back in 2002, he's a good friend of mine, lots of fun to be with. And like me, he loves beautiful women, and some of them are on the younger side. I mean, we knew that. He knew that. He knew that Jeffrey Epstein had a bunch of younger girls around. And in that comment, it sounds to me like he was saying, "Yeah, and I like them younger too." So, I mean, and we've seen the stuff he says about young women, the Miss Teen Universe pageant, all this stuff. So the idea now that suddenly we've got, oh, look, Trump may have been involved in this after all. Of course he was. Of course he was. We know what kind of a man he is. We know that he was, macking on women from the time he was a young man. I mean, this was going on forever. He thought he was Hugh Hefner. He sort of fashioned himself, his image, as a Hugh Hefner type, surrounded by beautiful women, and now he was just this great stud. So none of that is really surprising to me, but I think it is important in that it really seems to have discombobulated them. And we know this because of the fact that Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace, I mean, Marge Green is off on her own thing, but those two, Boebert and Mace, I just assumed they would cave on the vote. I really did. I'm surprised, at least one of them, which is all it would have taken. The fact that both of those women stood by and they dragged Boebert up to the Situation Room in the White House and leaned on her with Kash Patel and Bondi there. And I don't know if Trump and JD were there too, but I mean, they put the screws to her and, obviously tried to get her to do it, and she didn't. And that tells me, that just shows the weakness of Trump on this issue. The fact that he couldn't strong arm just enough people in the House to keep that vote. And it would have worked. I mean, if he'd have been able to do it, we all would have gone, well, they tried, what are you going
Right.
to do? And we know it's not going to pass in the Senate, and he's obviously not going to sign anything. And even if he did, Pam Bondi, all she has to do is just say, no, I'm not going to do it, and sue me. So, we know that is very unlikely to actually happen. But the fact that these people actually stood there and stood up to Trump, and I can't see how it could have been a setup. I mean, can you? I mean, why would Trump set that whole thing up for his own purposes? He just didn't. I think it's real what we saw there. Boebert and Mace defied Donald Trump. And, frankly, I'm surprised, but I think that there's something there. And all Trump's doing today, he's laughably going in there. Well, I have ordered Pam Bondi to go to investigate Bill Clinton, J.P. Morgan, Chase, and a bunch of other things
Reid
from what we've,
Hoffman.
yeah, I mean, it's insane. So, I mean, he's rattled, obviously, beyond anything we've seen before, which, of course, makes everyone even more suspicious. that there's something really bad in there. And I'm assuming at this point it's got to be video or something, just
It's
really
gotta be,
horrible.
I mean, what more could be in there that we haven't sort of like reestablished via these emails?
Yeah.
And I think I there the it is I've just found it fascinating, both like the Trump strain of these emails and then just sort of like everybody else that Epstein sort of seems to have had relationships with. I mean, the irony is like there doesn't seem to be any like real the same level of sort of bombs when it comes to Democrats. At one point, I think Epstein says that Hillary Clinton was having an affair with Vince Foster. He implied that in one of those emails. He has emails with Larry Summers, who, yeah, I mean,
Whatever.
um, you might as well be saying, I don't know, JFK had an affair with Marilyn Monroe. I mean, like it's not super relevant these days. Larry Summers, I think, you know, I think he's done in Democratic politics now. Maybe he
Like,
already was, but
yeah, he can't get
thank
back.
goodness. I mean, he was a very difficult, but he's done not just in Democratic politics, but I think he's done in politics. Like
Yeah.
he was sitting there harping during the Biden administration, upset about a lot of the antitrust stuff and a lot of the Biden attempts to spend money, and so good riddance to him. Like it's almost like we're getting rid of the worst of a generation one by one in these instances. But there's a lot of it makes you really wonder what's going on with Trump here. And the we mentioned this 2 days ago when it came out. The dog that didn't bark.
Yeah.
That's the one where it shows Ghislaine Maxwell, or I'm sorry, that was the Michael Wolf one, but there's other emails that say that Ghislaine Maxwell lied to Todd Blanche, Trump's
Oh, no
DOJ,
doubt about it. No
and
doubt about
and that's going to put if nothing else comes out, it's going to be very hard for them to do anything more with Ghislaine Maxwell without looking really, really suspicious. And that stuff, a Democratic Congress is going to have Jamie Raskin or whoever it is going to be on that committee is going to have a field day if they take over. But the
Well,
dog that didn't,
don't you think Elaine, though, that I mean, they've given her this sent her to this cushy, low security prison. They're giving her all these special things. That's kind of like to me, and I just wrote about this, so it's on top of my mind. To me, that just says this is just to tide you over, hon. Just, we'll make it a little easy for you. But Trump on the way out, of course, he'll take her. He'll grant her pardon or clemency
she
for
was
sure.
asking
But
for
she's going to have to hang.
commutation. Yep.
Yeah, she's just going to have to hang in for a bit, and we'll make it as easy on you as we can. Don't worry, you got a puppy. You're getting all the, the privileges, and we'll punish anybody who causes you any trouble in the prison. And you just hang in there, hon. We got you. We got you. I really think that's what's happened. It's a total deal for her. And in the emails absolutely validate the fact that she lied her ass off to Todd Blanche, or she and Todd, wink, wink, nod, nod, as they were recording their interview. I mean, I have no doubt that Todd knew exactly, that Blanche knew exactly what was going on there.
It's also interesting to see how far into the prison uh, Donald Trump has the ability to project power into, right?
Interesting, isn't it?
If you could do it in one prison with one prisoner, maybe you could do it in another prison with another prisoner.
Yeah. I mean, you have to wonder.
Uh,
Even Ghislaine said that she thought that Jeffrey was taken out in prison. So I wonder. I mean, it does make he's got a lot of power and he's not afraid to use it. So let's just put it that way. And there are people that he knows who are willing to carry out his orders under the understanding that if anything were to ever happen, that they were found out that he has the plenary power of the pardon. So, and that's going to be something going forward with Donald Trump we're going to have to deal with, because this guy was given immunity for his official acts. He has the power to pardon anybody. that he wants to for any reason, and he's showing it day in and day out. He pardoned the Binance guy who, is basically stuffed a couple $1 billion in his family's pockets. And he has no shame, no, hesitancy. He just does it. And so anybody that needs to do something to help Donald Trump, and Ghislaine probably knows that too.
Yep. Um,
I don't.
Getting back to that, the dog that didn't bark.
Yeah.
I think at the time, I think Matt, you made the point that it was a Sherlock Holmes reference, and Epstein was a pretty literary guy, and the dog that didn't bark was basically a dog that knew the truth, like, or
Mhm.
knew
Knew the criminal.
There was a burglary, and the dog didn't bark on the occasion of the burglary, and it's suspicious. It suggests that the dog knew the burglar, basically.
Exactly. And so Trump not barking, I think I had first interpreted it as, oh, he's not talking.
Mhm.
But it's also that if you read it over carefully, it seems this is after Epstein. There had been I think it was in the BBC, a documentary about him. This is leading up, to his first conviction. And the question was, like, why hasn't Trump spoken out about this?
Mhm.
And I think the implication is that he may not have spoken out about it, not because he was protecting himself, because remember, this is 2011. I mean, Donald Trump is still going on Howard Stern, basically saying
Yeah.
horrible things. But more so because maybe Trump was the person who provided information on Jeffrey Epstein. You'll recall that when questioned about this, Mike Johnson first came out, remember, for a day, had let it hang out there.
Yeah.
Trump
Yes.
was an FBI informant.
Mhm.
And so one wonders if Donald Trump was somebody who sort of fingered Epstein in that case, provided evidence or information to the FBI, and because he knew exactly what was going on there, and maybe got protection himself in that instance.
Yeah. I mean, are you suggesting that Donald Trump would have done something vengeful against Jeffrey Epstein? Like, for instance, beating him out on a big real estate deal where he ended up getting a vast profit from the house that he ended up beating Epstein over by selling it to a Russian money launderer. I don't think Trump would do anything like that. He's just honest as the day is long, and he would never do that. Now, the idea of him being an informant is very interesting because informants tend to have protection. They get immunity for whatever crimes they were involved in. So, and that whole deal, the sweetheart deal that Epstein got in 2008, the first time he was indicted and actually prosecuted and convicted, is just unbelievable. It is an unbelievable breach, and the fact that Trump then put the prosecutor who who concocted that deal into his cabinet is beyond belief. It's so interesting because this is one of the aspects of this story that I hadn't really followed that closely until recently, as it's come back. There was a federal prosecution getting ready to go on Epstein, and it was thorough. They looked at the money, they looked at everything, and the money is one of the untold stories about it. Nobody really understands it, but they looked at it. The prosecutor there had it all ready to go. We've never seen that. I can't remember what they call it. It's sort of a draft indictment, I guess. Um, and they just absolutely deep sixed it and went for a state charge, and then we know what happened. He pled guilty, and he got he got to leave in the daytime and come back at night and have slumber parties with the guards, I guess, at the jail. It was absolutely unbelievable that happened, and just an incredibly weird coincidence that Trump then rewarded that prosecutor who put together that deal by putting him in the cabinet. Hard to believe that
It
could have
is
happened.
hard to believe. And I'll say also, one of my sort of like pet theories about Trump in the run up to the 2016 election and the 2016 October 2016 piece in the New York Times about how there was a mutiny coming from the New York FBI office against Comey. It always struck me, here's a guy who's clearly had business practices that were dubious for decades.
Yeah.
You go from he gets that consent decree in the 70s about you got to allow black people into your apartment buildings. And then he's basically untouchable, or untouched, I should say, for years and years. And then you have an FBI office in New York that is very, very protective of Donald Trump, and has a relationship with Rudy Giuliani, who Trump also did. And you start to wonder, and had a special advisor in Felix Seder, who was I think it's a report, not just a reported CIA and FBI source, but Loretta Lynch, the U.S. attorney under the Obama, when she was at the U.S. attorney's office in the Eastern District, had written an affidavit on his saying that he was a source. You start to wonder, if Donald Trump was the person who gave evidence to the FBI about Jeffrey Epstein, did he have a pre-existing relationship with the FBI? Was he one of those people who escaped scrutiny from Manhattan DA, New York Attorney General, all those years, guys trying to make their name by going after big fish? I mean, Donald Trump you would imagine someone would have brought something against him, but never did. I don't know. There's a lot there that I feel like, because what else could be in this trove of stuff that Trump is so virulently trying to stop from being released?
That's the thing. I mean, it's a crazy way to be dealing with this. I just saw somebody, I can't remember, it was Michael Smirkonish or one of those guys on cable, going, well, there's been no evidence that Donald Trump did anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. And, you'd think that he would just go ahead and release them, and say that, that they should release the files and get it behind him and just do the right thing here. And all it does is raise suspicions that there's something in there. And I'm screaming at the TV, there's something in there. Obviously.
What's the obvious answer to why he's so desperate to hide these things?
No, I'm going, why is everybody giving him the benefit of the doubt? It doesn't make any sense that he's doing this. You've got to be kidding me. So I just, it's beyond, and he really is desperate. This stuff that he's putting out today on Truth Social is absolutely pathetic. It is flop sweat, times 1,000. That he has, he's now reduced to going after J.P. Morgan and Chase, and saying that they need to be investigated, because he's busy running the country and we should stop. I mean, he's basically begging people to stop talking about it. And of course, they're not going to. And it's very interesting to me. I think Trump has always had he's got a lizard brain instinct about what his followers care about. I don't know where it comes from. He's a rich guy from Queens. I don't know where he gets this instinct, but he has it. He's just, I guess, because he's a jerk, and so are they, most of them. But he can, this has got him worried, and not just because of the revelation. It's because he couldn't get Lauren Boebert to turn. He could, he doesn't have any power on this. He doesn't seem to be able to do it. I mean, he had Charlie Kirk before he was killed, and others, the influencers, they're out there going, well, I'm going to believe my friends in the White House and I'm just going to let this go. But nobody's letting it go. They're not letting it go. And the base isn't letting it go. The Fox audience, they can black out the story all they want, and their audience is still getting it. They're getting it on their, in their emails from grandma. Everybody's talking about it, whether he likes it or not.
Let's play a clip from Ben Shapiro. We played a clip earlier in the show of Megyn Kelly beginning to define away the problem with Epstein liking teenager types, as in 15-year-olds. And, my point was like, she's constructing an excuse not for Epstein because Epstein's dead. She's constructing sort of like a machine to exculpate Trump if that turns out to be the situation. Here is
and by the way, just before you do, I just want to add something. The person she was talking to on her show, I don't know if you showed the clip of her answer. Her answer was, well, Epstein may have liked those young guys, but when they aged out, that's when he would send them to his friends.
Right.
It's like, okay. So
that was Batya Ungar Sargon, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. And then when they turn 18, that's when guys like Trump, to men, that's fine, no big deal. And the truth is, in those Epstein emails, he, validated that thing that we saw earlier in the birthday book about how he had turned over one of his girlfriends to Donald, that he had given one of his girlfriends to Donald Trump. They've identified her. I can't remember her name, but there's pictures of Trump out there with her. And she was like 22 years old. So,
and now she's legal. Of course, she's been trafficked, but he knows that. But they are working overtime to create all sorts of like pre-defenses that exist. The defenses are existing out there, and then Trump just happens to run into them. That's the defense. Here's Ben Shapiro taking a different tact that this is all political.
So yesterday, after the House of Representatives reopened, Representative Adelita Grajova of Arizona became the 218th and final signature on the discharge petition. She joined all the other Democrats, as well as 4 Republicans, including 2 who hate President Trump and would like to destroy his presidency. That would be Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace.
Okay. First off, like, they're doing it because they hate him and they want to ruin his presidency.
Really?
Well, let's just assume that's the case. Why would this ruin his presidency?
Good question.
I mean, he's accepting the premise that there is something there that is incredibly damaging to Donald Trump. What could that possibly be at this point? Like,
his friendship with Bill Clinton.
Yes. He was out like, I liked Roy Cohn. Like, what is it what secret could there be that would ruin Donald Trump's presidency? I'm not even convinced that if the worst of the worst is in there, that it would. But Ben Shapiro seems to be making the argument that there's something in there that's going to ruin his presidency. And he doesn't really realize he's admitting that. And as well as not really explaining Mace and Boebert's issues as well. But it's interesting to see that like they're trying to make this political, but again, they can't seem to escape it. Let's play this clip of Massie and Kana. This is number 9, talking about the pressure that the White House has applied to him. And again, he could hate Donald Trump, but why would he think there's something in there that would destroy Donald Trump's presidency? I mean, what could that possibly be?
Wait, I got to give credit to Lauren Boebert to walk into the White House, the center of power, the free world, really, and to sustain that and to come back out and to be solid, and also to Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene. There was all the speculation that they might take their names off, and they never did. So it's not a hoax. It's not a moot point. It is a very serious thing. There are 1,000 victims, and there are survivors who have had a press conference with Ro Khanna and I. And that's what we're fighting for, justice for them.
Did y'all talk to them at any point during this, as the White House was making clear they were targeting these members?
I talked to them. I don't want to say which one I had this conversation with, but one of them was told, we can't let Massie have a win. How petty is that? I mean, this is more than about political wins. It's about getting transparency and justice, which, by the way, this administration promised. You have the Vice President, J.D. Vance, you have the AG, you have the FBI director. They've all done a 180 on this.
So the White House said to one of these members that they didn't want you to have a win here.
That's correct.
I mean,
do you buy that? Do you buy that the reason why they're fighting so hard is they don't want Massie to have a win?
No, I do not. I had heard that before, that he didn't want Massey to have. I mean, I heard it, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, that he was upset about that. But of course not. Of course, that's not the reason. That's ridiculous. I mean, Trump is petty, no doubt about it. But this is, insane. And by the way, Massey got the win. So it didn't work. If that was it, Trump just proved that he has no juice left whatsoever, because he can't even, persuade one House member, some of his most fervent supporters. I mean, Nancy Mace is a lunatic, and he couldn't get her over. I mean, I was shocked by that. So I'm sorry. That's of course ridiculous. I mean, petty, yes, but that's even beneath Trump.
You know
I
how he
think.
could also denied Massey a win is just release it on his own.
Yeah.
And then Massey's just sitting there like, we don't need you, Massey. I have a feeling the entire White House apparatus is not sort of functioning just to prevent Thomas Massey from getting a win. Like, as if he's like on the precipice of like, winning the presidency. Thomas Massey.
And it's funny because the the fact that these guys are so determined to keep this quiet, the DOJ, they know what's in those files, right? I mean, you could sort of understand why they might be unhappy about keeping these emails from the Epstein estate that were just released, out of the public, because they didn't, and Todd Blanche even told, he was on X yesterday going on, arguing with George Conway and saying, well, I didn't even know those were there. How dare you? I didn't even know about these files. They hid them. The Epstein estate hid these emails, is what he said.
The House was able to subpoena them.
Yeah. Well, apparently the DOJ just didn't even know they were there, or they were hidden from them in some way, according to Blanche. Of course, he's probably lying. But let's assume that's true, that they didn't know about those. And so those come out. They know what's in the Department of Justice files, and they are doing everything in their power to keep those things from coming out. And they know what's in it. So,
and if it was just information that you could glean from the emails, then it's like, okay, end of controversy. We're done.
Yeah. I mean, it would be done. There's unless Trump is just, I say he is kind of crazy and demented, senile these days. I guess it's possible that he's just stubbornly just saying absolutely not, and that he's just sticking with it. But I don't believe it. I don't believe it, because everybody has to be telling him the smart thing to do here, Mr. President. Just let him out. We'll suffer for a week or so while everybody goes over it, and then this whole thing will be done. They have nothing else they can do after that. There's no more room for them to be asking for anything or doing anything. But they won't do it, and there's a reason for it. And Pam Bondi, and Kash Patel, they were determined to release those things before they got in there and saw what was in there. I mean, you have to assume that they know. So
let's I want to just talk about one more thing too. In the wake of the Democratic elections a week and a half ago, because you just wrote about the Texas gerrymander.
yeah.
And explain the dynamic here, because it's sort of fascinating. Gerrymanders work, all things being equal.
Right.
But when things are really not equal, sometimes they can go very, very sideways. I mean, people were talking about this even before the election, that the Texas gerrymander is may be a little overconfident. Explain that dynamic.
Well, it was risky. And in fact, in the piece that I wrote for Salon, there's a GOP consultant who says, they were just, completely drowning in their own fucking hype, is how he put it. Because they thought that that Trump's, 1.4% win somehow had ushered in 1,000-year reign, right? That the Republicans could never lose again, because all the Latinos and young people had moved over to the conservative side, and that they had a new majority that they could count on. And particularly in places like Texas, where all those down in those border districts down there that are heavily Hispanic had voted for Trump instead of Harris. So they thought that was it. So Trump hears this and he issues his edict we deserve it. We deserve to have those seats because I won big, so we deserve to have more seats. So I want you to gerrymander. Texas smartly saluted and said, yes, we will do it. Well, we knew, as you mentioned, at the time that when you gerrymander like that, a state that was already pretty heavily gerrymandered, and you're doing it on the basis of one election where there was a swing vote that went, dramatically in the other direction, that you're going to have to dilute safe seats in order to do that. You're not only betting that that Hispanic vote was going to be there for you going forward in those districts, but that the other districts that you were, siphoning off, the safe red districts, that you're siphoning off voters from them to create these new districts, that they are going to be safe. Well, in a blue wave election, what was maybe a 10-point safe seat then is now a 5-point safe seat. In a wave election, that's doable for Democrats. That is a doable thing, and it's doable in those Latino districts. So they knew that risk going in, but they were so high on their own supply that they believed it. Well, what happened was those Texas Democrats who left the state, and it was a big dramatic thing last summer, drew attention to all this, and everybody in the country was watching them do it, and they took a lot of grief for it. And I felt bad because I thought, they're doing something pretty brave here, and if you're going to fight Trump and this fascist onslaught, you better be willing to take some risks and to be willing to go out there. Yeah, you're going to lose sometimes, but you have to be willing to try and to put yourself out there. And they ended up having to come back because they couldn't break the quorum forever. And the Republicans vowed retribution. And they took retribution on these Democrats who they passed a bunch of stuff that had been stalled because, it was really creepy transgender stuff and things like that Democrats valued, and they just went after it. And they're taking, personal retribution on some of these people that have high national profiles like Jasmine Crockett. But they did it, and they may be getting the last laugh, because what happened was suddenly the rest of the country woke up, saw what was happening. Gavin Newsom went out.
Yep.
He also took a big risk. Because in California, and I did not know this at the time, and I was assuming that California would vote for the ballot measure to redistrict here, but it wasn't true. They did internal polling, and it looked bad. It was like at 36% approval, and that was in July. Within a few months, with Newsom out there, with all the onslaught, we had a ton of ads here. There was a lot going on. It won overwhelmingly during the November election. So, that virtually canceled out. Even if Texas were to maintain those seats as Republican seats that they gerrymandered, California will cancel them out. So it was a completely useless proposition to begin with. And even worse, it may be that they actually lose some of those seats because they've diluted them, and they're counting on a Hispanic vote that was proven in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia to have swung wildly back to the Democrat side. So the whole gambit, even if you look at where they're picking up seats, in North Carolina gave them one, and I guess in Ohio they did a redistricting that actually looks like Democrats may actually win in some of those seats too, in a similar dynamic as what we are seeing in Texas. And they're trying hard to do this, but there just isn't a whole lot of juice there. And what they found out in doing this, that guess what happens? You draw attention, you do something just completely obvious like this. We're going to rig this election on our behalf, basically. It wakes up the rest of the country too. And guess what happens? California, wait, we have clout too. Guess what?
That's the point of losing well. Right? Yes. Those Texas Democrats lost that fight, but they did so in such a way that it inspired people in California and people in Ohio and whatnot. Now, like you say, it may turn out that the Republicans are hoisted by their own petard in Texas. Just to be clear on that, if you have three districts, two of which are plus 10 Republican and one which is plus 5 Democrat, and you want to make the Republican ostensibly win all three districts, you got to take plus 5 from one of those plus 10s, plus 5 from the other one of those 10s, put it into the Democratic district. And so you have 3 plus 5 Republican seats. The problem is if you have a wave election and Democrats overperform by 6 points, you lose all 3 of those, which were 2 sort of safe seats and 1 Democratic one.
Yep.
We'll see about that. But at the very least,
you know, there's a name for it. I don't know. I just learned this when I was writing my piece. There's a name for it. It's called dummy mandering. And it's actually something political scientists use, because you just don't do that if you have any sense, right? You just, in situations like this, you just don't.
you know, I have to say, Digby, this was probably the most hopeful conversation we have had in
Shocking.
a year.
Yeah, it was. It was, and it's pathetic, isn't it, that it had to happen
Yes,
around something like this? But I'll take it.
the bar is so low that we're not even talking about like positive legislation or. Well, we'll take what we can get. Heather Parton, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. We will, of course, link to all of your work at Hullabaloo, which still remains an invaluable daily read for me, and your pieces over at salon.com. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.